Hey, how y'all doing? So, we're going to talk about names today. So, we're going to talk about the importance of names. And I do think that names are really important, especially in an entertainment business where, names come attached to faces and identities and different things. Like in other entertainment fields, right? Most people, except for like rap, most singers and stuff like that usually have some version of their real name. Um, but it's only in like wrestling and sometimes in like actors being an actor, you'll come up with a completely different name, and it's a way of having a working name or a public face and having a private face, right? But so the public face and the private face, for people who don't know, it's how you behave when you're in public versus how you behave, in private. Some people are good natured, human beings in public, but they're really tyrannical assholes in private. Think about Hulk Hogan, right? The character of Hulk Hogan was one thing. Terry Bollea as a person was something completely different. Hulk Hogan will always be the public face of Terry Bollea. The Hulkster never said anything untoward about people, but Terry Bollea has. Just like we know Hulk Hogan has a giant dick and Terry Bollea doesn't. Apparently, that was the case in and when he got on during that lawsuit. But there's a good bit of magic to names, and so when I was asked to do this subject, I said I was gonna go look in the books, and so I did. I just decided to go look through some books. And I actually came across this book called Egyptian Magic by E.A. Wallace Budge, and they talk about names in here. Basically that you can look at a public name as sort of a magic. It's something that they created. It's created for public usage. It's an identity that is usually not real, but an extension of the person who is using it. We all use these things. Most of us who, especially most of us who use like YouTube under made up names. Like my name comes from a movie. Mongo Slade comes from a movie. And the Magnificent is just because wrestling has these sort of grandiose names to it. So that's really where the public face comes from. And I've had a lot of people who would say like, "That's Bill Cosby," and I would say, "Yes, that is Bill Cosby. That was from a movie." And, and people were like, "You're supporting Bill Cosby." I was like, "No, I just thought the character's name was funny, and I think the character looks pretty funny, so I kind of just rolled with that." But that's sort of your public face. And some people, sometimes your public face gets a little tarnished, as mine did because of Bill Cosby. But whatever. I was using the Mongo Slade name before Bill Cosby got arrested. Anyway, I'm gonna read a passage from this book, and then we're gonna talk about wrestling names and how some names fit or they become synonymous, and how other names, while they may sound cool, they just don't have the cachet. So this is from the book Egyptian Magic. It says the Egyptians, like most Oriental nations, attached very great importance to knowledge of names, and the knowledge of how to use and to make mention of names which possessed magical powers was a necessity both for the living and the dead. It was believed that if a man knew the name of a god or a devil and addressed him by it, he was bound to answer him and to do whatever he wished. And the possession of the knowledge of the name of a man enabled his neighbor to do him good or evil. The name that was the object of a curse brought down evil upon its owner. And similarly, the name that was the object of a blessing or prayer for benefits secured for its master many good things. To the Egyptian, the name was as much a part of a man's being as his soul or his body, or his body. And it is quite certain that this view was held by him in the earliest times. So the idea that a name is just as important to you as your body or your soul is very interesting, right? This is, why some people, when they come to WWE, they choose to change their name or they try to license out their names, like AJ Styles or CM Punk, right? Like it's not just who they were on the independents, but it's largely who they are, right? And changing their name would force them to be somebody else. Theoretically, maybe in terms of their psychology, they will have to be somebody else. You always have to be somebody else when you're on television or something like that, but that's kind of how it is in movies and stuff like that, right? Where, you look at one guy, Al Pacino, and you look at all of the different movies he's been in. Michael Corleone is not uh, is not Tony Montana, right? They are both public names for the purpose of using these characters. It had nothing to do with Al Pacino as a person, right? Psychologically, he has to get in a different headspace to play Michael Corleone, and he got to get in a different headspace to play Tony Montana. So thinking about a wrestler from that perspective, it would make sense that, sometimes to go back to Hulk Hogan, sometimes when Hulk Hogan is, taken off, all the gimmicks are taken off and they're put in the closet, and he goes back to being just Terry Bollea, he has a different mentality, a different approach. So it's all about cultivating that approach. So sometimes you have these names, and these names may be weird, right? It may be like a weird name, but it might have some significance to it. Like there was supposed to be, and I read this in the dirt sheet, so I don't know how true it is, but it was supposed to be the Great Khali, right? His name was supposed to be after, I think, a mountain or a god of destruction or something like that, but somebody misspelled it or mispronounced it, and it ended up just coming out Khali. But that, but that was supposed to be the idea behind it. Like the Undertaker is literally an undertaker, right? Like when you look at it, it's an old West undertaker, you know. But what about a name like Mankind? When you look at Mankind, like what do you think when you look at Mankind and you attach that name to it? What are you pulling from it? Like what is the visual that they're trying to give you? What is the label, the identity of Mankind? And then you learn, like if you think about things abstractly, right? Think about things not as objective, but as just like floating relative terms. Some people believe that humankind exists to suffer, and that was mankind's gimmick. Mankind's gimmick was there was an eternal longing, an eternal suffering to Mick Foley, and as he put on the mankind mask and had played that mankind character, there was a lot of suffering and pain in that character. And some people would say that that is within the soul of mankind. So you would think about something like that. Think about stunning Steve Austin, right? What was about stunning Steve Austin? You think, okay, blonde hair. Typically they say, pretty boys have blonde hair or something like that. And pretty boy model, you would come up with beautiful, and you have beautiful Bobby Eaton, who is also blonde. So you will have something like that. Shawn Michaels was also blind. He was a Heartbreak Kid. So you would see like how those things would kind of group together, where you would have stunning and it would be like a model or something like that. And then you would think like the long flowing hair, like what was the guy's name? Fabio, I think his name was, where you had a lot of those muscular dudes with long hair. And that's how like a lot of wrestlers was trying to look at the time when he was like really hot. They was trying to get the Fabio thing. And Fabio was only had one name, right? It was a mononym, like Cher, like Madonna. And that kind of make you feel like a bigger superstar too. And WWE goes that way with it, where they try to come up with these mononyms. And these mononyms are meant to make you seem like a bigger star. Like Bill Goldberg, right? There's one thing to say his name is William Jefferson Goldberg, or whatever the fuck his middle name is, or if he even has one. It might just be William Goldberg, right? But it's one thing for it to be William Goldberg. That doesn't really have the catchiness to it. Then it's another thing to say Bill Goldberg. And it's like, okay. But then when you just say Goldberg, it's like he's the Goldberg. God damn it. You know what I'm saying? Like there exists no other Goldbergs except this guy. So we don't need his first name. We don't need his middle name. We don't need to know if he's a junior. We don't need any of that stuff. We just know that he's Goldberg. He is the Goldberg, at least for the purpose of this universe and the purpose of this world. He is the Goldberg. And if you find out his name is Bill, then he's still the Bill Goldberg. There are no other Bill Goldbergs, even though there could be 4 other guys in the locker room with the name Bill Goldberg. None of their public personas are Goldberg, right? And I remember getting into this conundrum, right, with L.A. Park, right? There was L.A. Park. Then there's El Hijo del LA Park, and then there was L.A. Park Jr., right? And so L.A. Park is the original La Parka. The La Parka you may remember from WCW. He lost. The name was owned by AAA. He had to go by a different name, so he chose the name L.A. Park. He has a son who is now El Hijo del L.A. Park, which literally means the son of L.A. Park. But L.A. Park Jr. is also the son of L.A. Park. But L.A. Park Jr., just like Rey Mysterio Jr., those are not necessarily the sons of, like, Rey Mysterio Jr. is not the son of Rey Mysterio. He is the nephew of Rey Mysterio. So WWE, when they gave him the name Rey Mysterio, they just dropped the Junior. For the purposes of WWE, there is only one Rey Mysterio, and that is Oscar Gutierrez Rey Mysterio. His uncle never worked in WWE, so they don't use the name Rey Mysterio, right? It's all about, it's confusing as hell sometimes when you do, like in Mexico, because they'll have those names. And like I said, sometimes a junior won't really be a junior. Really, they're just taking their mentor's name, or they're taking, sometimes it really is their dad. Sometimes it's not, so that's kind of stuff. But WWE has tried to do these mixtures of different things. Like Angel Garza, right? He was known as Garza Jr. when he wrestled in, I think, Impact. I think he also wrestled in Mexico as Garza Jr. Why call him Garza Jr.? There are no other Garzas in WWE. He could just go by Garza, which is his family name. But, they gave him a first name. I'm guessing his real name isn't Angel. But it would make sense if they would pronounce it in Hispanic like Angel Garza, because there is no angel. It's always Angel. But anyway, it's that sort of thing. When you think about names, you're thinking about it being attached to somebody's soul. And it's supposed to have a meaning to it. There was a reason why Rey Mysterio took the name Rey Mysterio Jr. There was a reason why Chavo Guerrero Jr. was Chavo Guerrero Jr., right? When he came to WWE, he's known as just Chavo Guerrero because Chavo Guerrero Sr. didn't work there. And then when Chavo Guerrero Sr. did come to work there, they changed his name to Chavo Classic. so they do these things because they want to build an identity. They're trying to build, and part of an identity is the soul. So you want to build a soul. How do you build a soul? Likes, dislikes, attitudes, thought processes. Just like you build a character. That's what your character is. Your character is, in some ways, your soul. So in cultivating the Ultimate Warrior, the weirdness of Jim Hellwig is lumped into what the Ultimate Warrior is. But the Ultimate Warrior is wholly a creation of different ideas and images that was pressed upon Jim Hellwig, right? But then you also have things that, like when they create these ideas, sometimes you have the growth of an idea, and one of those growing ideas is like Hunter Hearst Helmsley, right? The idea of Hunter Hearst Helmsley was supposed to be obviously some type of snotty, I don't want to say British blue blood character, because I think he was supposed to be sort of French or, Northeastern American, plays polo kind of thing, And that was the image, the soul that they created as far as Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And that was the way the character was portrayed. The long blonde hair, the big nose that was always turned up, the snarl that was on his face, the way his gear, the things that he wore, like the jackets and the cane that he used to carry to the ring and stuff like that. Then you have the beautiful woman with him. And it was always like a cocktail party where he would like wear like gloves and stuff. But then over time that began to change. It became Hunter Hearst Helmsley, right? Had to change. He was going in a different direction. The character was growing. It had outgrown being sort of the Greenwich blue blood character. And now they was attaching new things to the character, new attitudes to him. So then you started seeing it go from Hunter Hearst Helmsley to HHH, right? And that's when you started. They still was calling him announcing him as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, but they were going HHH with it. They were rebranding him slowly but surely. And then now it's just Triple H, right? It's no longer HHH, no longer Hunter Hearst Helmsley. It's just Triple H. It's a completely different character at this point. Like what existed from the beginning no longer exists now, even though it's kind of taking them full circle. But that's like a character thing. Like we could go through that, but that'd be I've been working on that forever. But you've been taking, you could take these things and it's got it going full circle. Like what Hunter Hearst Helmsley was supposed to be is kind of, there are still elements of that in Triple H's character currently. It's just more executive and less like Connecticut blue blood, right? So there's different ways of looking at this. So so it was very interesting. So like, what are you trying to? So when those are difficult things, right? And those are a little bit of some thought that you have to put into a name. Like when I create characters, I create names. I try to find out what's the reasoning behind a name, what a name means, and stuff like that. Because I really want the name to actually have a meaning that fits the story. But then you get these situations where you kind of like, all right, you have Alexander Rusev, right? And then you have this idea like, why change Alexander Rusev to Rusev, right? And then I say to myself, well, in common parlance, we call each other most of the time, like sometimes we call each other by our last names, right? Like I used to work at a place where they never used first names because you were always, because I worked in a youth facility. So they would never, like, your name, your full name would be on a your card or whatever. But they will always refer to you as Mr. So and so, Mr. Mrs. Such and such. So the kids will also get in the habit of doing that, Mr. So and so, Mr. Such and such. And then what you would do is in these situations, you would also sometimes even shorten it more than that, and you would just call somebody by their straight up by their last name. And sometimes you have those situations, and in the military, you also have those things where, they'll call somebody Johnson, this is Johnson's seat, that's Johnson's locker, this is Johnson's place or whatever, and everybody has this idea of who the hell Johnson is because there could be 500,000 Johnsons, right? But you may just say this is Johnson's, this is Johnson's stuff, and you're supposed to know, you're expected to know who Johnson is. Like if I tell you this is Johnson's, bed, this is his bunk, you're expected to know which Johnson I'm talking about, right? And if you don't know, then you're on the outs. You're supposed to know who I'm talking about. And it's the same thing with Rusev. Like I couldn't imagine them calling him Al. Like could you imagine somebody like, and when I think about these things, sometimes it's kind of, you have to go to that point, right? You have to be like, well, what if they just did something stupid like, hey, we're going to call him Al. Hey, Al. What up, Alex? Like, could you really call this big hulking guy, call him Alex? Al? It kind of fits that you would just call him Rusev, And some people are like, I hate that change. It's like, yeah, but, when you get real familiar with people sometimes, you do get, people get with the nicknames, like Randy is a nickname, but it's not as awkward as you calling this big hulking guy Al, Like I remember when I was a kid, people would never call Mr. Perfect. They would just call him Perfect. I'm going to see you in the ring, Perfect. Sometimes they even call the Bret Hart Hitman, or they call Roddy Piper Piper. Like he had a real full name, sure, but the commentary team would just say, "Oh, nice back body drop by Roddy Piper," or he's really getting in Piper's ass now, or something like that, right? They will always call Hulk Hogan Hogan. They will always call Savage Savage. So maybe they're just trying to shorten it and bring it to that level where we're just going to cut out the middleman of the commentary being the only ones that call them that. You also have to play to the lowest common denominator in entertainment. And people don't get that and they think too much about it. Like there was a story that came out recently that Renee Young, I don't know, Paquette, is that her name? But anyway, Renee Paquette or whatever, that she was trained to drop her Canadian accent for the purposes of doing broadcasting for WWE. And people were like, why? And it's like, you have to appeal to the lowest common denominator. If she's saying Z instead of Z and, stuff like that, it may throw some people off, especially people who are, maybe low IQ and they don't know that Canadians pronounce Z Z. They don't know. And it's throwing them off. It's like when you write, you write to the lowest common denominator. When you speak to the lowest common denominator. You want to reach as many people as you possibly can. You don't want to alienate people. So in some ways, the shortening of names, the manipulation of names, is all about one, creating an identity, creating a character. Two, it's about appealing to the lowest common denominator, making it easy to identify one person with one name, right? Antonio Cesaro. Like, what you gonna do? You gonna call him Tony Cesaro? Like, that would probably be funny. Like, Tone, what's up, Tone Cesaro? What's up, Tony Cesaro? But if you call him Cesaro, like, nobody else is going to have that name. Nobody else going to be like Cesaro Jr., El Hijo del Cesaro, or anything like that. So you could just be like, Cesaro, we know who this guy is. Boom, Cesaro, 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 right? So that's just one way of thinking about it, you know. There's also these terrible names that really, they sound so uncool. The Viking Experience. I mean, come on, bro. The Viking Experience is horrible. Um, but and I think I did it before, a video on the name changes, and I talked about Big E. And when you say it fast, like Biggie, you think Biggie Smalls and Notorious B.I.G. And I really didn't think about that until I put some thought into it. But that's actually a very good cultural name, even though I think his real name begins with an E. I think, or his last name begins with an E. I don't remember, but it's very interesting. Like Kofi Kingston, his name was supposed to be. His name is Ghanaian, because Kofi legitimately means Friday or born on Friday. But Kingston was supposed to be Kingston because he was supposed to be Jamaican. So it's supposed to be like Kingston, Jamaica, right? So that was the birth of that name, and I'm glad it didn't just, you know, when they dropped the Jamaican part of the character, they didn't change his name to like Kofi. Kofi, that would suck. Mononyms don't always work, and that's the one thing WWE needs to recognize. The mononyms, like Ali, didn't work. Ali didn't work. It was too many Alis. There's too many people named Ali, you know, and then you might get them mixed up with Muhammad Ali, you know. But I like the Mustafa Ali. I like that because sometimes, like, nobody's gonna call him Mustafa or Mustafa. I don't want to get into falling in that pit of how to pronounce that name. But nobody's ever going to call him like Mustafa. I'm going to kick your ass, Mustafa. Or they might just say, you know, Ali. Because usually that's the lowest common denominator. We know who you're talking to. There's nobody else in the company with the last name Ali, at least not on TV, you know. But you did have this issue where there was like two Aliyahs, I believe. There was Aliyah in NXT, and then there was another Aliyah whose name I can't remember. Like, who, like, I see her face in my head, but I can't, it's not coming to me. But you know, you have those problems. You're trying to identify, or, you know, each character, give each character their own individual character, their own individual magic, their own individual importance. So what you would do is you would build a story around each name, and you would build an image around the name, and then the person would act it out, and then they could take it off and put it away if need be. It's like Wade Barrett. Like, Wade Barrett disappeared. For all intents and purposes, he disappeared for like 10 years, right? And then magically Wade Barrett returned. You know, like, he wasn't Wade Barrett anymore when he left. When he came back, he's Wade Barrett again. So, you know, there's something very interesting to that. But this is just an interesting subject I thought, you know, I was asked to jump into. And once I really started thinking about it, I was like, yeah, you could really think about the different names. Usually guys just take their real name, Shawn Michaels. You know, his name is really Michael Shawn. So he just kind of switched his name around and then just built an identity around that. You know, you have situations like that, or you have a guy who using his real name, or, you know, which is kind of easier for him. But I know that's got to suck, especially when his real name gets dirty, you know, like Marty Jannetty. Because I was just thinking of Shawn Michaels with Marty Jannetty. Like, you Google the name Marty Jannetty, and you get Marty Jannetty with the Rockers. You also get Marty Jannetty killed a guy. You also get Marty Jannetty wanted to have sex with his own daughter. And you get all that stuff. You know, like China and China Doll. You know, she would use the word China. You have Rhino, who would have to change the spelling of Rhino. Change the spelling of Taz to make it individual, to make it unique. And there's a lot that goes into it, but it comes across as being very lazy and very weird, because usually they just chop the name in half. You know, they just get rid of it. And sometimes it's like, but, you know, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, you know, but it just depends. It just depends on whether people really gravitate towards it. And then, of course, when it's the name, since they trademark the whole name and then just parts of a name, you can obviously just add the first part later. You know, like I would sometimes would rather they gimmick the first name rather than drop it. Like like Matt Riddle. Like I would rather they had done something to his name rather than drop his first name. Like he was always calling himself like Stallion, right? Like why couldn't this go like Matt the Stallion Riddle or something like that? Like back in the old days, you had like Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, right? Like they don't do that anymore. Like the quotations around the big name, like you would have like what's the Nick Aldis thing, the National Treasure, and then you would kind of have to figure out what he means by that. Like, what do you mean, like, Paul Orndorff is Mr. Wonderful? What is the Hitman? What does that mean? What is the Macho Man? What does that mean? And then the character will describe to you through their performance what that character, what that name means. And I really love that. I used to really like that. And I wish they would go back to doing stuff like that. But for some reason, they just don't. They prefer not to. I guess because it's easy for guys to take those names and travel. Like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Like, if I remember, like, you had Ricky Steamboat. He was Ricky Steamboat for a long time. And then it was like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, which I believe is a WWE pickup. Is that he was actually nicknamed the Dragon there. And then he took it and went to other places as Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I don't remember. I don't know, because I know Jake the Snake Roberts was Jake the Snake Roberts before he came to WWF. But I don't know about Ricky Steamboat. I don't remember. But sometimes, they add these accoutrements to the name and it end up making the guy a bigger star and he's able to take that name and go somewhere else. So they basically start hacking names and changing them and shit, which isn't necessary. But look at TJP. He was going by TJ Perkins in WWE. Then right before his run ended, he called himself TJP. Now he wrestles everywhere as TJP. So, there's no, that's just kind of how it is. But this is me rambling on about names, and but let me know what you guys think about the name gimmick. This is the second video I've done on names, but I think that names are meant to build a personality, build a character, build a soul or an identity for a person, and it's useful. The mononyms, like when you say Cher, you know who you're talking about. You say Madonna, you know who you're talking about. It's to make that one-in-one combination. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. I thank you guys again, and I shall talk to you guys later.